We want to get a bit more on this story. I want to bring in Matt Long in Phoenix. He is a former prosecutor with a specialty in violent crimes, including those involving firearms. Welcome to the program, sir. Appreciate your time.
Hi, nice to be with you.
Let's just start first with what Alec Baldwin is facing here.
Well, as I understand, he's facing up to 18 months incarceration, as well as a pretty significant conviction, which carries its own consequences. Any felony conviction, especially one involving a victim, especially involving a dead body, just simply has lifelong consequences.
Let's talk about the charges. Is it 2 charges of involuntary manslaughter against Baldwin and the armorer?
It's my understanding there are 2 separate charges, which are alternative theories. This is maybe lawyer games of saying that if giving the jury potentially a chance of saying, here's 2 different theories or approaches as to how involuntary manslaughter could be committed.
Can you explain that for us, just for regular viewers? Is it easy enough to do?
It's really not. These are, again, these are reindeer games that lawyers play, right? The one thing that I think is instructive is when you have a prosecutor alleging an in the alternative theory, that already begins with a problem. If the prosecutor says, we know he done it, and this is how he done it, that's where you hope that those with power to charge start from, not here's one theory, but if you don't like this one, here's this theory. That's, I think, the most significant thing is that why does there need to be an in the alternative theory if they say they know what happened?
So what this involuntary manslaughter comes down to is negligence. Correct me if I'm wrong. Someone who has responsibility for what happens on the set.
Well, that's right. I mean, well, you're now talking about the set, which brings up different factual questions as to one's mental state. But we're really talking about the mind of the individuals charged, Alec Baldwin and the armorer in this case. What was in their mind? Clearly, by saying involuntary, they're saying that there wasn't any malice, this wasn't their intention, their design, but that there was some sort of either criminal negligence or recklessness standard based on their duties and their various roles here. Here you have Alec Baldwin with a role as an actor, as the trigger puller, but also as the producer, which has some oversight and procedural and protocol issues as it relates to safety. So it becomes a question of their duty with regards to any sort of conduct that results in a death, a tragic death. But could they have implemented policies or followed reasonable standards when you're dealing with a firearm? You mentioned the set. This complicates things. This isn't a typical firearm that might exist if someone hands me a firearm here and says, "Hey, this is unloaded." Well, that's a deadly weapon. Its design is to kill, is to cause mayhem, is to cause damage. This is a prop. And it involves dummy rounds and other aspects, which complicates the question.
Yeah, but still, let me jump in here then. In March 22nd, or March 2022, the armorer said that she was not called to inspect the gun. And what she also said after this, which may not bode well for Baldwin, said Baldwin knew he could never point a firearm at a crew member under any circumstance.
And that's an important point. It's a critical point because this shooting happened not as in some cases where they're filming and there needs to be somebody covered by the barrel, by the gun. Here he's practicing, he's drawing, and he's practicing some things. So just the basic gun safety.
He pointed it at the person who died. Right. No.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying the fact that he did that in a practice situation is problematic for him. Basic gun safety says Do not point that gun. No, I'm not here advocating for Mr. Baldwin. I can assure you that. I'm fairly objective as a victim's rights attorney as well as a defense attorney. I believe that it's important that the questions be answered. And there are questions here, and here absolutely that there's just fundamental safety violations, gun safety violations that any individual should know. Any person with his experience should know. Any person with his production experience should know that the first rule of gun safety is to treat every gun as loaded and do not point any firearm, whether it's a dummy gun, a prop gun, a real gun, at anything you do not intend to kill or destroy. And in this case, that act, the fact that it's happening while he's practicing and covering individuals and pulling the trigger, which he says he didn't do, which also becomes an interesting question as to his statement saying, I didn't pull the trigger when there appears to be evidence that he did, certainly raises questions, and it indicates some evidence of negligence, at least potentially recklessness, in pointing a weapon in whatever condition at an individual while practicing, whether it be dry firing, whether it going through the movement, covering an individual, anybody in that scenario is dangerous.
As a former prosecutor, we spoke about kind of the problems with the case at the beginning, but also the fact that he did point the gun. Do you think this is a winnable case against Alec Baldwin?
Well, every case is winnable. Every trial is a dogfight. This comes down to the presentation of the prosecution, whether or not they can present a coherent theory. And whether or not they really do have the evidence. I think so. Absolutely, it's winnable. If you charge a case, any case is winnable. It comes down to the jury mentality, the jury psychology, and what they feel comes down to reasonableness in any context. But here, if the prosecutor didn't believe that they had the goods in order to convict, I don't believe they would have charged, because if they did, they're simply going to look foolish. First, potentially incompetent, and it raises questions if they don't have sufficient evidence to get this particular guy in this particular context, then one should question all of the charging decisions and the discretion that this prosecutor office utilizes in any case.
What are you going to be watching for?
Well, the real issues to me is that this is the protocols, the safety protocols in the context of a movie shoot. What are those agreed upon? What is the history of other films? How have they been instructed? This isn't the first movie shoot involving firearms. So we have many years of history in order to know what those things are. So for me, my question becomes, what was Alec Baldwin's specific role as producer in ensuring that safety happens? That's one question. What is his duty given his what is his training, background, and experience as it relates to firearms? That may be a separate question. So I'm looking into that. I'm looking at the armorer's responsibility and what really happened there. There's questions about why were these live rounds mixed in with these dummy rounds and who involved that, because there's questions about the supplier as well. So you have 3 or 4 layers of potential ways to say that a crime was committed by Mr. Baldwin and the armorer. And I suspect that's one of the reasons why you have potentially in the alternative theories, because you say there's one theory where he's the trigger puller. Well, there's the other theory as him as producer and his role in making sure and having control over that entire set, especially as it relates to the safety of individuals anytime you bring a firearm, a functional firearm, which this is. So that's the other question. This was a functional firearm, not a pure prop that could have had the firing pin taken out or other things that could have been done to ensure the safety of that weapon.
Okay, Matt Long, I'm going to have to end it there, but what a fascinating discussion. Really appreciate your time on the show today.
You're welcome.
Matt Long is a lawyer and former prosecutor with a specialty in gun crimes. Thank you, sir.